In this episode of GYDA Talks, Robert talks to Tim Dunton of Nimbus Hosting. Tim has worked in hosting for over 20 years and in 2011 founded Nimbus. After seeing a gap in the market for agencies, Tim and Nimbus launched Storm, a hosting platform designed specifically for creatives.
Hello and welcome to the GYDA Talks. Today I'm delighted to have Tim Dunton with me. Tim comes from Nimbus Hosting and actually just 2 nights ago I was with Tim celebrating a year of GYDA, the Grow Your Digital Agency initiative in London, and it's great to have you with us, Tim. Hello and welcome.
Good morning, Robert. How are you doing? You all right?
Absolutely great, absolutely fantastic. So let's start with a random question, which is just tell us something. Tell us the random fact. What's the random fact that people probably don't know about you, Tim?
In fact, it's a good one, actually. It took me a while to think of this, but back in 1996, I registered foolishly, well, maybe foolishly, British-Airways.co.uk, thinking that I could sell it back to them. But actually, they hadn't registered it. Anyway, they didn't take it well and essentially sued me. So, yeah, that was good fun, actually. And I was only 15, 16 at the time.
That's a brilliant. It's a brilliant idea, actually, doing that. So what is... just give people a bit of background. What is a typical day in the life of Tim?
To be honest, normally if the weather's nice, I generally cycle into work, get in for about sort of 7:30, 8, meet some of the guys that are already in on the early shift, make a tea, coffee with them, and have a chat, and then we can really get on to what's going on. Although I'm MD, I spend almost most of my time working on the product development side of things. So a lot of that time is spent liaising with our existing internal team, sales and marketing and technical, and then also talking to our development team and our clients as well, getting some feedback from them, what they like about us, what they don't like about us, how we can make it easier for them to work with us, and how we can make it easier for them to do business.
So what is your experience? I mean, obviously you go that Friday night conversation. You go, digital agencies we work with. What's your experience of digital agencies? What do you think their strengths are?
I think when I first started, I had a sort of digital agency myself, but that's even before the phrase was coined. But what I've always really enjoyed about them is they're normally pretty good fun. They're quite fussy, especially when it comes to some of the technical side of things, because obviously they're creatives. But also what I really like about them is they're always looking to change, always looking for new things, whether that's new design or new ways of working. So I think for me, that's what their strengths are.
What about their weaknesses?
The weaknesses for me, although I think they're creative, that naturally means that they're probably quite chaotic and disorganized. And maybe that's the reason why they're looking to change. And I think from our point of view, from Nimbus's point of view, that's how we can help. We can provide some sort of structure and try and keep things simple and straightforward for them.
So Nimbus Hosting, you're a hosting company, and one of the nice things, just giving you a bit of feedback is, ahead of the interview, I put out the feelers. When we first met at Ungagged, and I put out my feelers, and everyone kind of raved about you, which is great.
Good,
but how do you see the reputation that hosting companies have? What do you think their reputation is, and why?
I think generally it's good, although it's like in the industry, you've got the cheap guys and you've got the expensive guys. I would say we're in the middle, but with the cheap guys, you perhaps have issues with reliability and performance, while then with the high-end guys, I would say some of them have the sort of attitude of maybe it's sort of like selling double glazing, really. So yeah, you've got the whole, I think you've got the whole spectrum, but nothing more than any other agency, really, nothing industry, really.
So, yeah, I mean, the question is, are all hosting companies the same? I mean, if you're on the market for a hosting company, you've got a range of price points. I mean, the price points are, I don't know the internet, but there's 300 or 400% difference in price. So, tell me about that. I mean, are they all the same?
No, they're not. I think until recently, I would say they probably have been quite similar. I'd say the industry's gone through quite a lot of change in the last sort of 5 or 6 years. But up until that point, I think everyone was pretty much selling the same thing, everyone was selling servers or web space or VPSs or shared hosting and email. So it was pretty much the same. The only real differences were going to be things like customer service and uptime, really. That's the only real way you could differentiate yourself. But I would say these days, in the last 5 years, the uptime performance is kind of almost a given these days. It's not something you really shout about. You've got to have something new and different that really sort of sets you aside.
Go on. So this is the moment for you to tell us in a way. So the question, is, and it has to be asked. I'm sure you're asked every time you're pitching the service. How is Nimbus different from other hosting agencies? Why? This is a question people hear me ask all the time. Why should people bother to buy from you when they can buy from the competition? What makes you different from the rest? Because everyone, as you quite rightly said, everyone says fast, reliable, cost effective. So what makes you different?
Exactly. Well, I'd say from Nimbus's point of view, there's a few reasons. We've primarily focused on digital agencies, so we don't go after the whole market. So that means that we're a bit more tailor-made, laser focused. Exactly. That's one of your mantras, isn't it? Yeah. But also we provide a complete solution. So we're not reselling other people's solutions, but also we're providing something we've built in-house. So our key product, Storm, which is our hosting platform, the whole point of that is to work for digital agencies to make them more streamlined and easier for them to work with people. I would say there's a lot of complexity in the market. And in fact, I think that doesn't help people at all. Because there's so many players these days, not just people like AWS or DigitalOcean, but then people like Wix and Shopify. There's so much choice out there. So we simplify that and say to agencies, this is what you need. This is what's going to work for you. This is what's going to allow you to grow.
So could you give an example of how you make the experience, or you make the service better for the digital agencies?
Certainly. So yeah, one of the things, as I said, our platform Storm, we manage it and monitor it on a sort of per minute basis. And the whole point of that is to really find out how our customers are interacting with it, to see how we can simplify it. So can we make it easier to set up a website? Can we make it easier for them to enable make the website secure? Can we make it easier for them to deploy a website to it? And see how we can remove steps. So our product essentially does weekly updates, and you can just go back a few weeks and you can see how we've made it easier and easier and easier for our clients to do these tasks that otherwise it would take a lot longer. To give you an example, we can get a website with WordPress and Let's Encrypt installed and up and running inside a minute now.
Okay, so I get that in terms of being, features of what you do, but in terms of benefits, because as an agency owner, I want my host to be reliable. That's has to be sort of number one. But also there's something about how can Nimbus make my agency more efficient? How can it make me more profitable? I'm just trying to get to what the benefits are of buying from you.
But to give you an idea, one of the things we like to look at is our tickets. So the amount of tickets or contacts we've had from clients. And I personally believe we should try and reduce that as much as possible. Not because we don't want to talk to our clients, but because if they're not raising tickets, that problems don't happen in the first place. And that means that they've got instant saving. They don't have to raise a ticket with us because the problem doesn't happen in the first place. They don't have to wait for that response, and then they don't have to deal with that response. So it's more of a seamless process. And obviously that means it saves an agency time. And obviously, as you know, an agency time is money.
I mean, for me, dare I say it, for me, the benefit is that you are real people, and I can find your company address with a brick. And if I'm really unhappy, I can throw it through the metaphorical shop window.
Exactly.
And the number of times you try and contact someone, you go, there's no phone number. Mail app. They've got a ticketing system. They've got a bot. It's like, are there not real? Can I not talk to someone about this? Because there's not someone there that I can actually talk to. So
it's a very good point, actually. We don't try and hide our phone number. We don't try and hide our email address. You can call us, you can email us, you can do a live chat, whatever. You can ring us now and you'll speak to someone technical immediately.
cool, lovely. So going back to the digital agency. So you ran a digital agency.
Briefly, I'd say briefly, maybe 4 or 5 years. That's how I kind of transitioned into hosting. So in the sort of late 90s, after I annoyed British Airways, I moved into building websites for people. And that was when we were called a web design agency rather than a digital agency, and essentially built a few things. And I did hosting as a sort of add-on. And at the time, because I was more practical than, say, creative, it meant more. It was easier to get into the hosting market instead.
So if you think about the digital agencies we met the other night, there's 2 questions. The first question is, what, short term, day to day, what do you see as the biggest challenges that agencies encounter?
I would say there's a couple of things that I've noticed over the last year or so. One, I think, has been in terms of getting talent, specifically on the developer side of things. Getting developers seems to be very, very difficult. And that, again, I'm sorry to pitch our product here, but that's where we've kind of made it easy for clients. So you've got things like account managers and you've got web designers or graphic designers that can use our product. So it's not like the developers that got the keys to the castle these days. Anyone can. And I'd say the other thing I've started to notice in the last, I guess since sort of second half of this year, is starting to be the budgets and people not really got the money to spend. So I know some agencies' budgets are certainly being squeezed now.
That's interesting. I mean, there's we're in this really weird stage of the year. I mean, as it happens, this is being recorded in the summer, and there's a whole load of Brexit nonsense going on. But obviously, when people watching later on, they'll have known what's happened to Brexit, whether we're in or not. But leaving aside the idea of being able to move into the future, talent, 100% talent. And I think there's an interesting thing about budget, which is those agencies who are really good and have fantastic reputations are being hit less by that budget constraint, I think, than the smaller ones. I mean, that's my experience. So what about if you actually go step back and you then look at the strategic piece, which is, what kind of an agency will people be running in 2 or 3 years' time? I mean, 3 years ago, Google was the gig in town in terms of advertising and PPC. And 3 years' time, who knows which platforms people will be using? But it certainly won't just be Google for PPC. And likewise, if mobile continues the way it does, AI continues the way it does, VR continues the way it does. I mean, I'd be fascinated from your point of view. Longer term, what do you think the big challenges are for people running agencies?
It's a good question, actually. I think it's going to be interesting to see where these technologies goes, and also I think I suppose I'm a little bit old-fashioned. I kind of see which ones want to take off. I think Google Glass was a good example of a technology that just didn't go anywhere really. And then you've obviously got things like driverless cars. Is that gonna take off? I'm not so sure. There's a lot of problems to deal with there. So yeah, I like to sort of wait to see what sort of things are going to happen first before I kind of put my toe in the water. I personally, I think there's a lot of sort of returning to technologies that already existed. So like, for example, podcasts is a great example. There's been a big resurgence of podcasts when I think the first came out in the late 2007, 2008. So that's quite interesting. And the other thing we're seeing is static websites. There's been a big resurgence in those recently. So I would say when I first started, you didn't have a CMS, WordPress wasn't around, so you just built static websites, and that made perfect sense. And then obviously CMSs came around and you moved to that. And there's now a move back to those types of technology. So I think it's kind of worth looking at our past in some ways to see what what we can bring forward and use again, really. So it's not just about, it might be new technologies to deliver some of those old things. So, like we've got now a podcast with video, which we didn't have before. And there are better ways of building static sites than we were using Dreamweaver in the late 90s. But some of these things are probably worth looking at those and taking inspiration from, I think.
Yeah, I think there's something something that drives me mad about video. I'll just get it off my chest, which is everyone goes to conferences run by Google, Facebook, YouTube, HubSpot, blah 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 blah, and everyone always says, "Look at the stats. Look at the stats for people visiting websites without video. Now look at the response to websites with video. Look at the response to video advertising. Look at the response to video instructions. Look at the response." And the thing that I really struggle with is all the evidence suggests that video is so incredibly powerful, and that's why I'm doing video podcasts, because they get to places and you know who's been watching it, and I know that after this podcast people will come up to me and say, who wouldn't normally come up to me will say, "Oh, I saw that podcast you did with Tim. Really interesting, that hosting. I hadn't thought about hosting being that. I hadn't realized how important it hadn't." So it really creates engagement and conversation. And yet it feels to me that partly because video, I guess, is professional, and it's fairly obvious from our production values today that neither you nor I has a massive production team with lots of lighting people and lots of sound engineers and lots of cameras. We're just doing it sort of, and I quite like that because it's on brand, because I get you and you get me, and we're not pretending to be something else.
Yeah.
But the industry hasn't taken on video despite the incredible evidence that it works so much better. So we end up with Facebook Live, which is even lower production values, even higher, and in some senses even higher impact. But there's a real conservatism, which is, we do websites or we do PPC, so we don't quite understand that brand thing because it's difficult to measure and evaluate. So no, we're not encouraging our clients to do videos, and yet video is cheapest, part of what's made people like you able to enter the market. Memory is so cheap, so therefore computing is so cheap, so therefore video is so cheap, and yet people haven't bought into buying video the way they should do.
No, I think I think the technology is probably there, but maybe the industry hasn't caught up. I think it took a long time for video to catch on, and a big problem I think is in open plan offices. No one wants to run a video in an open plan office, so it took a while for people to realise that and then implement subtitles. So I think that made a really big difference.
Yeah, and I think, I can't see what's behind the camera. I'm glad you can't see what's behind the camera here, but it's kind of this bit's clean. And so anyhow, I just find that fascinating, because it actually I can learn more about Nimbus and you and what you do just from watching how you react on camera than me going to your website, where you're obviously say, "We're good, we're fun, we're clean, we're nice, we're friendly, come and contact us." So it just feels to me blindingly obvious that video should be more popular than it is. Anyhow, that's my beef. Okay, so question for you, just a couple of questions just to round things off. And this one really is, if you were running an agency, what would you be getting sorted to guarantee the future of the agency?
I think from my point of view, I think it's all about processes these days. I know we're not an agency ourselves, but we've implemented a lot of development processes to make it easier and make it faster to deliver results to our clients. And I think that's really where agencies should go. Implement those processes, make them more efficient, and that's only going to improve your profit. And you know what? There's probably no harm in what you say. Put your prices up too. Okay.
Would you like to just expand a little bit more on what you mean by processes? Is that process for everything? Is it systems? Is it measurement? Is it performance management? Is it timekeeping? What do you mean by processes?
I think probably everything, really. From a development point of view, for example, we have strict processes in how we how we deliver our service, and we try and keep that the same all the time. Obviously, as new technologies and things improve, we try and add that in, but we don't try and add it in that often, because the more complexity you add in, then it just confuses things. Personally, one of our values is KFC, keep things simple, essentially. So we really want to try and in fact, it stands for keep it fucking clear. And the idea is that we just try and keep it simple for our clients and it's simple for us. The more complexity and more confusion you add, the more chances are it's going to go wrong.
Love that. Yeah, I may well steal that KFC, but yeah, but that's absolutely beautiful, because you think how often I was on a banking website this morning earlier on, and it's just like, you just go, it's like no one has ever done user experience. No one has ever been a customer and gone through this process. It really isn't necessary for me to be entering my name for the third time and my account number and the security code.
Exactly.
It's and then you get questions which make no sense, sort of circular questions which go, I can't answer that. And I had one yesterday where with the local city council trying to get a license for an HMO for and there were questions there which they just didn't make sense. I mean, they weren't questions. It's like, there's no verb. This is not a question. This is and you it beggars belief. Anyhow.
So I think in our industry, people love complexity. They love new technology. They love new ways of doing things, and that's great. I've got no issue with that. But I think for me, just keep things simple. Just keep things straightforward. There's a lot less to go wrong. It's a lot easier to explain things to people.
God Lord, yes. Okay, so from your experience, so you're kind of both sides. You've run an agency. You're a supplier to agencies, and I guess, I mean, you're in many ways you're a development house, so you're still agency. From your experience, what would be your top tips for running an agency? What would be your one-liners or your words of wisdom for agency owners?
I think it's really important to listen to your customer. That's really, really important. Keep asking them why. But also try to get bottom to that. It's the Henry Ford comment, if I asked my customer what they wanted, they'd ask faster horses. And it's essentially what we did, but we asked them why they wanted that, and then implemented something to do that. So I think it's really important to keep talking to your customers, keep looking at the industry. As I said earlier, the industry is changing faster than I think it ever has. So that's something to be really, really aware of. And I think today's world is not going to be tomorrow. So just very, very be aware of that. And probably lastly, focus on what you're good at, really, and only really focus on what you're amazing at, rather than just trying to get involved in lots of things. I don't know, you probably, Robert, probably see this. There's so many agencies trying to do so many things. They're trying to do email, they're trying to do SEO. They think the more they can sell a client, the more stickier they can be. But I think it just means you're not going to be an expert at all of it. You're only an expert at some of it. So just focus on what you're good at and kill it.
Brilliant, Tim. I absolutely love that. There's so much richness in that. I mean, yesterday, as I was saying, I spent a day with a client, and what we were trying to nail was, do you guys know who your client is? As in, are they part of a big organisation or a small organisation? What their intentions are? Do you know if they're married? Do you know if they've got kids? Do you know what they're trying to do with the business? Because if you don't, how on earth can you service that client? And like, all the heads of department. So yeah, getting to understand the customer and being brilliant at something and just sticking to it. I just love that. Absolutely adore that. Tim, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much for your insight and giving us a little bit of an insight into the hosting world and where you come from. At the end of the podcast, there'll be the usual links to Tim and to Nimbus. And on that, I'm going to say a very big thank you and farewell, Tim. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Robert.